The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's time for the Bill Clark Show, episode number 9. Pat Smith along with Landry Roberts from Three Man Front. Coach Bill Clark joins us. And, Coach, we say this every time we get together. What a wild, crazy weekend of college football.
Yeah, it just seems like it's getting crazier and crazier. We've got upsets. We've got just, I think parody. I know that's kind of a word we're all hearing, but we're seeing it. And, of course, it's making for some great entertainment to watch these guys and what's the line? I mean, kind of those questions of, what's it look like this week? We got some really big matchups coming up.
And I was mentioning this to Pat on Three Man Front, Coach, but it just seems like more so now, and I know we're at the halfway point of the season, but it seems more so now, week in, week out, it's more of a toss-up with some of these games. We're used to seeing it from a conference like the Big 12 in the past. Now we're seeing a lot more of it from the SEC. Mm-hmm. Which I think is fascinating. It's entertaining as a fan. I know it probably drives head football coaches nuts.
Well, I think what we're seeing guys saying this is what it takes to compete like Alabama. And we've seen people raise their level of commitment. I think NIL has had a way to help get that. Maybe they found ways to go down and grab some of these guys, but I think that parity is coming from a commitment. I like to talk about commitments from administrations and not just coaches and players, but from the people behind the scenes that say, we want to have a great program and this is what it looks like.
So speaking of parity and what Landrum was just referring to, we're seeing in the SEC, we're seeing teams that were predicted to be at the bottom rung of the list of the teams after we got out of Dallas at SEC Media Days. I'm talking about Vanderbilt and South Carolina. Vandy pulls the upset over Alabama. I want to go to last Saturday where South Carolina 2 points away from doing the same thing against Alabama.
Yeah, I think as people see chinks in the armor of a team, let's say Alabama, what Vanderbilt showed, I think it gives hope, especially a team that's, and I think the question's out, with South Carolina, how they played LSU, they dominate Kentucky. So I think up and down, but I think they saw that, and then I think Alabama gave them hope, which we can talk about. But right before half, what happened with the safety and the turnover gave them hope, kept them in the game, and there they were at the end. And that's what you want to do. You want to eliminate those teams early.
And going back to the unpredictability week in, week out, Pat brought up a great stat and a telling one of SEC games played so far this season. Underdogs, according to Las Vegas, 18-6
Wow.
in those games.
Yeah, that's a great stat. Once again, I always ask this, who says they're underdogs? Who are these experts out there? And I think those lines have really been close. But to me, a team's coming off an open date. We're going to talk about some of those teams that, like Auburn's got an open date. What does that do? This team's worn out. They had the big win. We go back to Alabama. This other team Vanderbilt had the open date. That is a huge factor, along with injuries and so many other things. And I think right now we're dealing with a lot of psyches. We've got so many players that are first-time players in a program. The amount of time I was speaking at a quarterback club last night, and I was talking about an off season. What does an off season look like, especially with guys that have been in the program where they understand about not giving up and not quitting and playing for each other and playing for your community. I think a lot of the mental part of the game, maybe we're seeing a different phase from some of these guys that have not been there very long.
All right, so let's talk about Alabama. What concerns you moving forward with this Alabama football team? Because the last 2 weeks have not been very good.
Yeah, I'm going to go back. I think their defense made some strides early on. I know people may not think that. That's the questions I get to me on the street. What is going on? Well, one, they won the game, but I think it's not a dominant defense. And when you don't have a dominant defense, then you get into this process. And I think this has kind of been Coach DeBoer's MO, where you've had to outscore people. We're used to seeing this dominant Alabama defense, which travels, obviously they had the huge win against Georgia. They played great in the first half. I'm not seeing dominance. I mean, I thought they did some really good things. They, had a really good series at the end of the game when you saw a lot of zero pressure. That was a change-up, and that's what you got to do. You've got to be willing to take chances. And I think, give them credit. They did that. Coach Womack did that at the end of the game, to make a stop there.
You mentioned Kane Womack, Alabama defensive coordinator, and paraphrasing a comment that he made, but basically his system and the defense that they have installed there, he thinks by the time at the end of the year, those guys on that side of the ball will have a pretty good grasp of it. This year more so than maybe some past seasons for this Alabama team, Coach. You've got a schedule, you've got potential hurdles, roadblocks that are there. Do you have enough on the other side of the ball to overcompensate for guys trying to learn on the run in the first year of a system?
Yeah, in his defense, how many DBs are new to this, to this program? How many guys did Alabama have that they had worked through their system. Obviously you had Downs, who was a freshman last year, but so many of those guys had been in his system and played for him before. I think we're in the world of new guys. Everybody's dealing with that. To his defense, I'm sure that will happen. We're going to talk about LSU later. I think they're hitting their stride a little bit defensively with a new defensive coordinator. So we'll talk about them later. But we'll see. I guess we'll see if that happens or not.
All right, so the Auburn Tigers had a bye week. When you were back coaching, how important was that bye week, especially when you're getting ready for a tough top 20 opponent on the road?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think if you handle it correctly, that was, I love to talk, and, I think that would be one of our great things to talk about practice. But the week of an open day, when do you give them off? When do you practice? How important is recruiting? Well, we know recruiting is important. For me, what I love to do is give them that extra day off. Come in on Monday, do your meeting, maybe you give them off Sunday, come in on Monday, and then you practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They get another day of rest, and Friday they get to be normal humans on Saturday, and then they come back. So there's so many great things besides just the injury. And do you put all your focus on that very next opponent? So if you got an opponent that you need to beat, you're just getting extra time. All these decisions that you make, and you go, wow, I like this. How we're handling 3-by-1 or what we're doing against a bear front or whatever, all those things. You get to play them out during the open day, and then you get to fix them. So there's injuries, there's rest, there's mental rest, physical and mental rest, and then there's just that extra game planning.
And I'm guessing just based on where you are, your schedule, your results up to that point, for Hugh Freeze, for the Auburn Tigers specifically, Coach, you need a win desperately right now. Yeah. And you need to stop treading water. A perfect opportunity, it would seem, to go and try to get some confidence for this team, because we went back and we talked about it. Though it was an 18-point loss in Sanford Stadium, the Georgia Bulldogs, you didn't turn the ball over. And I thought there were a lot of positives that you could take away from that performance by Auburn.
There's no doubt. I think they look like a real football team. I was at the Oklahoma game, and I thought they played well. I thought the quarterback played well, minus the turnover, which you can't turn. That's where I thought they made the great change in protecting the ball. They ran the ball against a good Georgia team. Once again, how good? We think they're really good, but how good are they? But at Georgia, this will be the question against a Missouri team that I think we don't really know how good they are. Now they're at home, but Auburn had the open date. Maybe they found some things in their running game. Maybe they're being a little smarter with the football. And if they do those things, I think they'll win the game.
Not a prediction, but just your thoughts. Well, what is the ceiling at this juncture for this Auburn team? Are we still looking at a potential bowl game for them, and they're sitting here at 2-4?
I do. I think they're a bowl team. Now, how just getting to 6 and from there. So, but they're going to have to find a way to win these games that are close, and that's the world they're in. You don't have a dominant offensive player. You've got a really good running back. You should be leaning on him more. So maybe he is the closest thing they have to dominant, but he's not at the quarterback position. But I think their quarterback last 2 games, minus the 1 turnover, has played very solid.
And now with the NIL, the potential of guys jumping in the transfer portal, do you start taking inventory of some of the guys that you've invested a lot of money in, thinking potentially after the season, is this guy going to be satisfied? Is he going to be happy? Is he getting enough targets? Are we keeping him fed?
I think all those things are big questions. I think you got 2 questions if you're Auburn. You've got what is going on with that. You've got these young receivers who are being eyeballed by a lot of people. I mean, that world, guys, is going on. I know y'all talk this every day, but the coaches I talk to, the worry they have about guys that are being targeted because they're targeting other teams. So if they're targeting other teams, they're getting targeted right back. So you got that. Number 2, they've got a really good recruiting class going. What happens if they lose this week? What happens if they lose the next week? Is it love of Auburn? Is it money? And does all this negativity start creeping in? Also, if they lose one of those guys or 2 of them, and I'm not trying to be negative. I'm predicting, and I haven't predicted much on the show. I'm predicting they're going to win this week. But I think they've got to. They've got to do something right here because you let this game go, and they got Kentucky, Vanderbilt. They can win every one of those games, but they can lose every one of those games as well.
Another disappointing weekend for UAB football. They go up to New York. They play another and they're now a top 25 team, Army. And we talked about it last week. Just the last couple opponents that UAB's had, the schedule has not been very friendly to the Blazers. But I want to talk to you in regards to maybe not particularly this football team at UAB, but just teams that have come out of the gate very slow.
Yeah.
They're facing only one win so far in this season. How tough is it in this day and age of college football to be able to keep that locker room intact?
It's very tough. And this is the worry I have just in general for college football is social media, and we've got so much access. I mean, we can go back and watch key plays. We can listen to guys like us talk about the games. The fans are so well read. They're so well versed now, and truly they can be very harsh. Now, where I get disappointed is when I see lack of effort, and that's inexcusable. And so, I thought there was some lack of effort against Tulane. It was bad. I thought I saw better effort this week. I do think Army, did put the subs in earlier, but I think the effort was better, but you've got to have the results to go with it. Now, if guys are talking about leaving already, if there's questions about your head coach, that ball starts rolling down the hill. So much social media. So it's been very disappointing. We're going to see if they can get it turned around. South Florida's not a bad team, so they've got to go on the road. They've got to get this thing turned around. But in today's world, it is tough. But that's your job as a coach to hold on to that. And that's why you got to play for more, and you got to take these guys and you got to play for more than yourself. You got to play for each other. And, there's got to be some love and commitment there.
And speaking of that, playing for something, where in the past when you didn't have the transfer portal, you didn't have NIL, you could sell these guys. These guys knew that if they were going to go somewhere else, unless they were a graduate, they were going to have to sit out a year.
Right.
So they knew that they were going to be there for the long haul. And you start selling, let's finish on a positive note, carry this momentum into the offseason, into next season. That's not the case anymore because, as you mentioned, a lot of these guys, I'm not talking about UAB, I'm just saying across college football, have already checked out and they've already got their next landing spot picked out.
Yeah, something's got to be done. I think because that's what we're going to start having. We're going to have in the teams that are really starting to do things like that, they could crater where they wouldn't have before. Before because they were fighting for all these other things. Now, I sit here and look at myself and say, okay, how would I handle these situations? And people say, why didn't you not sleep in season? Because I knew what happened with a loss. And that's why I always said we've got to win these games we're supposed to win. Somebody was talking about Coach Saban, and I thought it was a very good point. How was he? Because this is how I was. On those games that I knew were big games, I didn't have to say a lot. The preparation was there. I'd probably worked on those guys earlier. It was those games that we were supposed to win that other people thought were easy games. I knew they weren't. That was the game weeks you probably didn't like to be around me. I heard the same thing about him. I'm trying to make sure we win those games so we don't get in these situations. But Pat's question was, what if you're in this situation now? It's a big deal to stop it right there. You need to get a win.
All right, the Smart Bank Smart Call of the Week. Let's go out to the great Pacific Northwest where the Oregon Ducks, man, I don't know how long Dan Lanning has had this in his back pocket, Coach, but I got to ask you, the Dan Lanning, 12 men on the field, the NCAA did address it this week. They're now going to institute new policy moving forward, but the question is, was it cheating or being unethical? Which was it in regards to what Lanning did on that play?
I would question ethics more. I would say, I don't know how sometimes on a goal line play that 12 guys might have snuck out on the field for me a few times. So it could happen.
Wow, all right.
There is a thing
Secrets
called
revealed.
There is a thing called intentional jump. Where now this is the versus dead ball versus live ball. The clock is rolling and Pat Smith, number 70, Pat Smith, jump off sides. Pat jumps off sides.
I hold my helmet like I can't believe I just did that.
You can't believe you did it. It backs up 5 yards, and then the clock goes again on that same down. Well, that would be crazy if that happened, and somebody actually worked on that. So those are some things that are out there. Of course, I kind of look at it different. I know Coach Kiffin probably disagrees, but this falling out and asking a guy to pretend to be injured where I've got to bring trainers out, that's a different story to me. But obviously it was addressed today by the NCAA, so they thought it needed to be fixed.
What's interesting, though, we don't hear people complaining about a punter running out of the back of the end zone intentionally.
Right.
We don't hear a whole lot of people complaining about a defense letting a guy score because situationally the time in a game.
Right.
We don't hear that. We just hear it, and obviously it was magnified because
what
it
about
was
a punter
big game.
that pretends to be hit? He's acting, but we don't think anything about it. I think there's a point of reference. I thought it was good coaching, really, just good gamesmanship. Needs to be fixed. That to me is a little bit different because injuries are such a big deal. That's my only thing. It's the worry, is this guy really hurt That's the difference I separate from that, because is this kid hurt? Oh, wait a second, he's pretending. You know, how do you draw that line? So to me, that's a different subject than these things. I think that's just, this is the rule, and he used the rule to his advantage.
Well, good news is that Smart Bank sponsored Dan Lanning's great call.
That's right, Smart Bank, being smart. You know, we talk about Smart Bank a lot, and you know, I think once again the things that I love about those guys at small town banking, you've got all the resources you need at a big bank, but it's small town banking, quick answers, and just good people right here locally.
Web Concrete and Building Materials, Building Blocks to Victory, Coach. The big one, third Saturday in October up in Knoxville. We've got, for the YouTube viewers, we've got right now on the screen a very interesting setup as Tennessee and Alabama played a couple years in Neyland. Take us through this, Coach, what we're seeing in regards to the wide splits and what this Tennessee offense is trying to do.
Yeah, people have started talking about the wide split, so you can see that. I think where we're going to show you a little something different is what is happening with defense. Go back to the Oklahoma game if you want to go back and study. A lighter box with this 3 safety look. If you remember, we talked about. Now, this is not this. This is an old look. Look at these wide splits right here. So these are wide. This guy might normally even be all the way down to the number. So when it started out, they wanted to see where the divide guy, the overhang player. So when Art Briles originally came up with this offense, they taught the running back to hug this, and then there was a lot of perimeter throws. So here's what Oklahoma did. They lightened the box up. It was a 3-1 box with an extra safety here. They were able to have more guys to cover down because they're really good at these quick throws. A lot of people, what they do, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-man box, you've got 5 DBs. Extra wide splits sitting down here, and they end up, and you can see what they're in man coverage. When they go to man coverage, you're going to get a vertical shot because somebody's going to be pressed up here. What this allowed to do with a lighter box inside, which Oklahoma showed to do, force them to run the ball, there's always a deep safety. You understand? 2 deep safeties, right? They even have a third safety who's sitting here who can get in the running game, or he can run the deep middle. Don't forget about tempo from Tennessee as well. That's going to be a big deal for Alabama. If they get these shots or those big plays, that's when they really get rolling, okay? So will Alabama copy this? Because we've seen it. Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then Florida. Now, Tennessee tried to run the ball a little bit more early in the game against Florida, I think just because of that. This light box, I think this 3 safety look at Oklahoma, I think you're going to see that out of Alabama this week.
How much do you have to dedicate as far as attention to detail if you're Kane Womack, you're trying to get your 11 guys on the side of the ball doing something, and in some cases they're not accustomed to doing? Is that every player on that side of the ball, or is that just a specific group of personnel that you're probably dedicating?
Yeah, so what you're doing, you're basically, and I always say that, you're a run team. We want to take the run game, whatever we got to do to take that run game away. You're a pass team, reverse. And that's as we started seeing spread offense in high school where people really understood that. Go back to Hoover. And that was really something we were seeing in high school was not really going on. Then we saw the quarterback run game. That's when I started really developing a 3-2 box. Nobody really was doing that. You saw a lot of 4-1, a 3-2 box, played a lot of 2-man, okay, so we could cheat with those safeties. We could run those safeties in the box, and they could go double over the top. Then we started getting an extra DB, dime defense. So what Oklahoma did, and these other guys are saying, we're going to take your pass game away first, slow you down on the run game. Every once in a while we'll run a blitz, but we're going to go pass first. Instead of run first, pass first with an extra DB. I think we're going to set Alabama, but they've got to commit to that, which means probably go to more of a nickel. They're in a nickel defense now, but take out one of those D linemen and put in another DB.
So what do you anticipate Alabama doing? You just kind of touched on it there at the very end of that explanation. Do you anticipate Alabama to run more like what you were discussing in regards to having a 3-2 box? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I think. I think against these looks. Now, Tennessee's going to come in there and put a tight end in the box and try and force you into defending the box, which opens up their perimeter throw game. You've got to do something a little bit different. Now, they've had time to work on this in the offseason, but I think what we saw Oklahoma do was copied by Arkansas. Florida did the same thing against them. Now, of course, Tennessee's going to try and make some adjustments, but this is what they're known for, and nobody really had a really good answer to what Oklahoma did. So I think we're going to see that out of Alabama.
Well, the biggest difference, and I think that if there's a bright spot, if you're an Alabama fan heading in this game with maybe a low level of optimism going into Neyland Stadium, as opposed to 2 years ago in 2022, we had the 52-49 game, and the goalpost came down and got thrown in the river. You had Hendon Hooker, who is a deadly accurate quarterback. Much different story so far this year with Nico Iamaleava.
Right. And I think we were talking about long outs. What does that mean? So, you hit that baseball, you hit the long ball that goes to the fence and they catch it, it's still an out. That's what I've seen out of him a lot with Nico. A lot of deep throws there. Maybe guys are there, they're a little bit off. This kind of defense gives you a little bit more cover down on some of those quick throws, deeper safeties to help on. It's a little bit safer where you're not always in man free with this 6-man box. And they look out there and they see there's 4 receivers out there and they see 4 guys covering, they know what it is. So, I can see that happening, but he's not where Hooker was at this time.
Not a lot of talk, but to me, it's a big story that came out on Monday when Heupel said that their starting linebacker is out for the year with a torn ACL. Mm-hmm. Talk about how important that is, Coach, the quarterback on defense being out.
Yeah, I think when you get that guy, and it's like we always say, that guy's irreplaceable for this year. Now, you got guys and you got depth, and I think they've, obviously we know they've spent a lot of money in NIL and their defense has vastly improved, I think. But that's a big deal. That's a blow. And sometimes when you get those blows, it's hard to replace those guys. Obviously for Alabama, the crowd noise. I thought it was a factor in the game Saturday night with Florida, no doubt. I think they had some hard time getting those signals in there. They're going to be prepared for that, but I think that Tennessee environment is different. But I think losing that linebacker is definitely a blow to the defense.
All right, that segment brought to you by Webb Concrete and Building Materials.
Yeah, Phil Webb and those guys at Webb Concrete, they also do building supplies, so their locations, Oxford Showroom, Oxford Ready Mix, Heflin, Roanoke Ready Mix, Center, Pell City, which has lumber, concrete, and flooring, Birmingham, and Homewood. Those guys do it all with concrete and all the building supplies you need.
All right, each week, Alabama Power brings us Bill's Power Teams of the Week, and one thing's for sure, it changes because this has been a crazy season so far.
Yeah. Obviously, we're going to go with Texas number 1 like a lot of folks, and Oregon number 2. Man, what a great game. Oregon and Ohio State could have gone down either way, but, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. We've got Oregon 2, Penn State 3. I've got Georgia 4. We're going to know a lot, obviously. We got Texas and Georgia matched up. It's going to be huge. Ohio State 5, Miami 6, Alabama 7, LSU 8, Clemson 9, Iowa State 10, Tennessee 11, and then I've made a change. I've got BYU, who is undefeated at 12.
Well, you only have BYU there because you beat them in a bowl game.
You're really
Very
sold
true.
You're sold on Penn State at
That's
3?
a chance for us to talk about that game if there was ever a question.
That's true. That's right. You were the last coach to beat BYU.
That's right. Forget about last year.
Yeah. All right. That segment brought to you by Alabama Power. Great ambassadors throughout our community and for college football.
Yeah, Alabama Power has all kind of give backs to our community. I was looking and talking to those guys. Their service org does over 50,000 community hours each and every year. So they're always giving back. They're very, very philanthropic, and we appreciate what they do in our community.
Donahue Chevrolet's Drive for Success. Let's go to Austin, Texas, where, Coach, it's a top 5 matchup, the number 1 team in America, hosting the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, obviously Texas has been very impressive. Once again, Coach Sarkisian, and I talked about him speaking at my clinic, got to see those practice schedules, mirror image of Coach Saban's practice schedule. So you got a great offensive mind. They're playing really good defense. They've been impressive in the special teams. Once again, question of who have they played up to this point. Obviously, they had the big win at Michigan, but I think they're playing very well. So it's going to be a great matchup. Georgia going on the road. What does that look like? Now, I'm not a big look at the line guy, but I think we got to be here. I think they're favored right now. So we will see. Texas, to me, very complete. The question for me, once again, Georgia's offense. We're still looking for who are they. They found a way to put points on the board last week or week before last against Auburn, but I still think that's going to come down to Georgia's offense and what they do against that Texas defense.
Do I remember this correctly? The last time these two teams met, it was Bevo, the steer for Texas, that tried to kill Uga.
That is correct.
Yes.
Down the Sugar Bowl.
Revenge game for Uga.
Important facts, Lender.
It's a revenge game.
It's a revenge game.
Okay. I think you said it best, Coach. The secondary for Georgia has been a question mark.
Yep.
You saw Mississippi State. They moved the ball effectively.
Yeah.
What is Quinn Ewers? Is he 100% healthy, whether it's him or Arch Manning? You would think that they would be able to at least put some points up against Georgia.
Yeah, and I think just schematically, and maybe that's something we can talk about now that we've kind of got to our board. I think they do so many great things with condensed formations. When you see everybody squeezed in, and that's that run game, Texas gets the run game going, and then look for those deep shots. And you'll see a guy from a squeezed in set. There's 2 receivers here, and one guy clears, and that other guy's on a deep post or deep over route way down the field, and you've got those guys condensed, they've had to squeeze in for a good running game. So look for those shots down the field against Georgia's secondary.
Coach, Texas just appears to me like when they're playing at their best, they don't have any deficiencies in any phase.
Right. So, yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. I think they have really become a complete team. Their defense has really stepped up. And this is, you got this offensive coach, I think, getting around a really good defensive coach, obviously, and Coach Saban. How does a program look? I think he's built his program that way, and that's what you're seeing.
So you drive in with your Tahoe today. I know you're pretty proud of that from Donahue Chevrolet.
Yeah, I think the great thing about those guys, Donahue Chevrolet, having a chance to have that vehicle myself. I had somebody asking me about my Tahoe the other day, and obviously Chevrolet makes great products, but you got a great product in the Chevrolet, and then the guys at Donahue are just great to work with. I think they're going to try and get you the best price they possibly can. Go to DonahueChevrolet.com and check out what they've got.
Radiance Technology Defense of the Week. Let's go to the Bayou where the LSU Bengal Tigers, they put a beat down. Well, it was overtime. It was close, but still the defense performed well against Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think the defense stood up. And, when we start talking about Blake Baker, he was at La Tech when we played against him at UAB. We did win those contests, but he is a good coach. They got Bo Davis. They got Kevin Peoples. I think for them, they gave up some yardage. Ole Miss did a pretty good job, 11 of 22, I think, on third down. But when they got Ole Miss started getting past midfield, I really thought they stepped up. They held them to 4 field goals and 2 stops in the red zone where they got no points out of it. 5 trips to red zone, only got 13 total points. So when they needed to, and I know there was a big interception when they held them down there inside the 5 or whatever. Obviously, Harold Perkins was out for them, but they played well. High-flying Ole Miss offense stopped them when they needed to. So we went with them as the defense of the week.
That was such an LSU football game at Tiger Stadium, was it not?
Yeah.
Where it looked like Ole Miss, they were going to kind of take control early, and then all of a sudden you look up and LSU still hanging around, and anytime that happens down there, weird stuff happens.
Yeah, I think it's such an advantage for them playing there. That crowd is so unbelievable, and those players, get behind that energy, and they were there. They stayed in there and stayed there, and just listen to those players. They said once we got to overtime, we knew we were going to win the game.
We've already had one reference in the show of BYU, and when you beat BYU in the bowl game, it was at the Radiance Technology Bowl down in Shreveport.
Yes. So we, our friends at Radiance. I was hearing some things about drones today and flying over some of our installations. The guys at Radiance, that's what they do. They shoot down those drones. So Bill Bailey and the guys at Radiance were very, very appreciative of them, what they do for our country. Also been a sponsor of the game that we beat BYU in.
Yeah, you shot down that BYU offense in that game. Right. I can tell you that.
There we go. That's right. We'll keep alluding to that.
Yes.
Maybe they need to stay in our top 12, no matter what.
It was muddy. It was cold. Yes. The odds were stacked against you, and you knocked off that BYU team.
Yes.
Well, not only Radiance Technologies, but we got to talk about Jimmy Lee and the great folks at Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper, who presents this show each and every week.
Yeah, once again, Buffalo Rock, they're so – we were talking about Alabama Power, but Jimmy Lee and Buffalo Rock and those guys, so part of our community, so part of so many great projects. Obviously, Dr. Pepper being part of college football like they are, so very appreciative of them.
All right, so what do you anticipate? And another crazy, wild weekend, or will folks hold serve and it will be kind of one of those ho-drum kind of college football weekends?
I think it's going to be crazy. I really do. I think that's kind of the world we're in this year, and I think this is going to be, man, we've got some really great games. Seems like every week, but I think this is really going to be special I want to see what Auburn does. Alabama and Tennessee, you got, the great crowd there, and, of course, Georgia and Texas, along with others. But those are 3 just terrific games.
It should be a lot of fun. We appreciate everybody tuning us in each and every Thursday night on Jocks 94.5 from 6 to 6:30. Also, you can watch the show on YouTube on the Jocks 94.5 TV YouTube page. For Landrum Roberts and Coach Bill Clark, I'm Pat Smith. Molly Robinson helps us out tremendously each and every week. We hope everyone has a great college football weekend.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr.